Now that is a question that KAVA answers every day. KAVA offers modern Mediterranean dining rooted in bold flavors and wellness. And that is why you should invest.
Wait, hold up. Why should I invest? I see so many threats to KAVA's growth. Can you answer me this? How can you reverse slowing margins while scaling rapidly with the increasing expenses and at the same time compete with other competitors and sustain margins while your supply faces disruptions?
Rest assured, the Crimson Imperium is here to help.
Let's break down the status quo and talk about KAVA's strengths and flaws. KAVA's notable strengths include a distinct Mediterranean cuisine, a stable revenue growth rate despite rising costs, and rising global demand. However, KAVA has certain flaws that limit its growth as well. First of all, it has a capital-intensive expansion model. Secondly, it has a vertically integrated supply chain which reduces flexibility and makes it rigid. And lastly, it suffers from operational inconsistency. To assess KAVA's internal operations, we focused on diversifying supply and customer retention. Correspondingly, KAVA has been able to establish targets like an EBITDA margin of over 25% and a returning traffic rate of over 60%. This raises two questions. How can KAVA increase its expansion in the international market profitably? And secondly, how should KAVA diversify its supply and distributions? Therefore, we propose DIM, diversification of supply chain, international franchising, and marketing partnerships.
Our first recommendation is to diversify supply and distribution. Firstly, KAVA can outsource and establish inventory buffer for 80% of its key ingredients. This would provide protection against supply shocks and draw down extra stock instead of paying for higher price spikes. But this would cause inconsistency in key ingredients. As a action, KAVA can standardize its recipes and assess the disaster plans for suppliers. Secondly, KAVA can introduce CPG products as a lot of restaurants have recorded significant sales in its key grocery market. Financially, break-even could happen as early as year 3. But there's a concern that promotions would erode margins if you want to sell more in the grocery market. Therefore, we can use coupons to build demand and feature ads to share costs instead.
Subsequently, our second recommendation franchises abroad to avoid high KPX. There are two phases. Phase 1, pilots with high affinity markets, which are UAE, UK, and Canada, with different franchising models to validate receptions. Break-even are more quicker, as Canada can give paybacks within 3 years, and UAE partners provide capital and estate. Phase 2, expand to Saudi Arabia with JV, as it has affluent demographics. Next, scale to France, South Korea, and Singapore to mimic the cheap tourist approach. By year of 10, KAVA would have 30% of ROI and high investments due to diversified rates. Global growth can dilute the brand identity, so KAVA needs to tighten the brand control by agreements and mandating the reports.
The third recommendation is to pursue marketing partnerships. We focus on corporate and hospitality partnerships through KAVAntage program, like working with food service contractors. KAVAntage is a multiplier for franchising, and it would achieve an 80% RTR with a lower customer acquisition cost. But if failure on a large order could jeopardize contracts. Hence, a dedicated catering team is needed to provide only the best-selling meals.
So what does our implementation plan look like? In phase 1, KAVA needs to pilot and fortify by diversifying its supply and piloting in Canada, UAE, and the UK. Phase 2 is when KAVA expands by completing its product lines and supply chain while penetrating across Europe and Asia. Phase 3 is now when KAVA needs to optimize globally in international sales and in its partnerships. By the end, KAVA would have its own successful empire with EBITDA plateauing beyond 25%.
Count me in!